name is Heido and welcome to the Pantheon, where we're having a look at Kaldheim, the bitter frozen wasteland that is. And today we've got a rather interesting oof to have a look at. You know, it's an Eldrazi, it's all sorts of things, and it's mono blue. It's Orvar, the all form. 4 mana for a 3/3, with Changeling, which means he's absolutely everything in all zones. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. When a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. So, that last ability we're not really all that interested in. It's not very useful. It's too reliant on our opponents forcing us to discard. And yes, sometimes that will happen, but the main thing we're interested in is the instant and sorcery spell line. So how are we going to use it? Well, we're going to pack this deck full of a bunch of spells you won't play anywhere else. And that's what makes this commander so cool. And who doesn't love copying things? It just feels so good to have several thousand Sol Rings. If you like this, please subscribe. I'm going to be making tons more of these. I'm going to go through every single legendary creature ever printed and do a video like this for them. So if you want to see that, please subscribe. With that said, let's have a look at the top 5 for our all-formy man. In at number 5, we've got Thermal Flux. 1 blue for an instant, and you can choose one of the following. Target non-snow permanent becomes snow until end of turn, or target snow permanent isn't snow until end of turn. So, why is this good? Well, it can target absolutely any permanent, and then the last line of text is draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So, with our commander on the field, for a single blue, we can copy any one of our permanents, and it replaces this card in our hand because we draw another card. And it's an instant. It's just so powerful. It's just great. It works so well, and the artwork, just look at all that orange. Clearly, I'm a fan of orange, and it just looks gorgeous. It really does. Glamour Die is a 2 mana instant with the text, change a text of target spell or permanent by replacing all instances of one colour word with another. And then it has retrace, so you may play this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. So, yes, it's 2 mana. Not the biggest crime in the world, but we can use this over and over again with excess lands in our hand. And it's just great. And again, look at the artwork. It's just a big wasp thing. It looks great with a fairy on the back. Absolutely great card in this deck, and it's pretty garbage every single other place. Then we've got Whim of Volrath. 1 blue for an instant. Buyback for 2 mana. You may pay an additional 2 to play the spell. If you do, return it to your hand instead of your graveyard. Change the text of target permanent by replacing all instances 1 colour word on basic land type with another until end of turn. So this can target any single permanent on the field, even if it doesn't have, we can do anything with this card. And through buyback, we can keep doing it. And the fact it's an instant, in response to our opponents doing something, we can just make a copy of whatever. It's really cool. Mind Games is a single blue with, again, buyback. Tap target artifact, creature, or land. So we are restricted to artifact, creature, or land, but they are the main things that we're going to be wanting to copy anyway. And the buyback cost, slightly more expensive, but the fact that we can keep reusing it is great. And look at that artwork. Just his face so long and sort of the beard is so angular. It just looks fantastic. Giga Drouse, a single blue for an instant, but you can replicate it by playing a blue. When you play this spell, copy it for each time the replicate cost was paid. Choose new targets for those copies. So, with this, we can keep playing a blue to tap loads of things, but with the original copy, target our own permanent, and then every one of the copies target something else so that we get a copy of whatever we target with the original. So we can tap down a bunch of lands if our opponents, we can starve them on mana, or we could tap down their big, massive army and stop them from attacking us. Lots of uses for this. Hydroblast, single blue for an instant, choose one. Counter target spell if it's red. Destroy target permanent if it's red. So the really powerful thing is here, yes, if we're against a red deck, we can destroy their permanents and counter their spells, which is great. But because it's destroyed target permanent if it is red, we can target any other permanent. So we can target any of our lands and it won't destroy it because they're not red. So we can just copy anything on the field. Really, really powerful interaction, and it's been reprinted in Eternal Masters here. Dizzy Spell is a cool spell. I love Transmute. It's one of my favorite mechanics. When I got into Magic, I saw it and just thought, wow, this is really cool. Not very competitive, but it's great. So for a single blue, target creature gets -3/-0 until end of turn. So, okay, sort of cool. We can target any of our creatures, get copies of them. But the transmute ability means you discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, play it only as a sorcery. So for 3 mana and discarding this, we can go and get any one of our repeatable cards. We could get Giga Draft, we could get the other cards we talked about before, Thermal Flux. It's just so versatile, and even if not, you could go and get your own Sol Ring for 3 mana. Not the worst in the world. Which brings me on to number 4. And in at number 4, we've got a couple of cards here that we want to copy ourselves. Spellseeker is one of the better ones. 3 mana for a 1/1. Very aggressive. Human Wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So every time you make a copy of this, you can go and get another spell that could make a copy of this, and so on and so forth. And you just churn through your entire deck. Really, really good. And it's just a great bit of interaction that you can go and fetch up. You can even get Cyclonic Rift with this bad boy. Willbreaker is another fascinating card. 5 mana for a 2/3. Whenever a creature an opponent controls become the target of a spell or ability you control, gain control of that creature for as long as you control Willbreaker. So yes, we want to target our own creatures the majority of the time, but we can turn those instant sorceries on our opponents and gain control of all of them for as long as we control Willbreaker. So if they've got anything, a combo piece on the field, we can steal it at least for a little bit, and then they have to remove Willbreaker or bounce it back to their own hand or something like that, which is really, really, really powerful. Peregrine Drake, an absolute combo classic here. 5 mana for a Drake with flying. When it enters the battlefield, untap up to 5 lands. 2/3. So with this, we just target it with a 1 mana spell, and we've instantly generated 5 mana. So it's like a massive ritual every time we cast something on this, and we just create an army of flyers. Cloud of Fairies is very similar to this. 2 mana for a 1/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, untap up to 2 lands. And it's got cycling. You know how I love a bit of cycling. So this is exactly the same. We can just make a little army of flyers and we can keep regenerating our mana. Really, really cool. Which brings me on to my number 3 pick. And in at number 3, we've got Unsubstantiate. Now, these cards are versatility. We could target our own permanents, but we can also interact with our opponents. So for 2 mana for an instant, return target spell or creature to its owner's hand. So if our opponents are going to, a big massive spell, oh no, sorry, back to your hand to recast it, you absolute buffoon. Or we can return one of our opponent's creatures or one of our own and make a copy of it so that we can then recast the creature. It's just so much versatility on a cheap little instant. Very, very powerful. To go along with this, Remand is another one of these spells that we can just copy. Spells and things like, yes, we want to be copying. No, I can't copy spells. We could return spells to our opponent's hands and draw cards. And that is very powerful. We can stay in the driving seat. Yes, we want to be targeting permanents with our spells, but we have to be wary of what our opponents are doing. So Remand, 2 mana for an instant, counter-target spell. If the spell is countered this way, put it into its owner's hand instead of onto its player's graveyard. Draw a card. And we can also use this on our own spells. So say we're targeting a permanent with an instant or sorcery. We can bounce back our own instant or sorcery to our hand, draw a card, and then we can reuse the instant or sorcery. So it's a nice little buyback mechanic that draws us cards, gets us through the deck. Precursor Golem is a wonderful card in this deck. 5 mana for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, put 2 3/3 golems onto the battlefield. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single golem, that player copies that spell for each other golem that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those golems. So, what we can do, target Precursor Golem. We're going to get a copy of it. But then once the copy resolves, we can spread out all of the new copies of the spell to all of the precursor golems. And we can just draw tons of cards with our little things or make tons of copies. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. Narset's reversal, very similar to Remand. We can bounce back our own spells to reuse them, and we get a copy of it as well. Double blue, copy target into a sorcery spell, and then return it to its owner's hand. You may choose new targets for that copy. And again, worst case scenario, we can target our opponent's spells with this and bounce them back to their hand and get a copy of them. Very, very powerful. Nice bit of interaction. In at number 2, we have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. So, our commander allows us to make a copy of something. Why don't we make a copy of our commander? So every time we cast an instant sorcery, we copy things twice and we get 2 tokens. But because the legendary rule doesn't apply on Sakashima, why don't we copy our commander and make copies of our commander so we can just keep spiraling out of control, and then we can make tons and tons of copies of everything. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces is a 4-mana 3/1. You can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces' other abilities. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control, which means if we copy this, we can just make tons and tons of our commander. There'll be Orvars all over the place, 3/3s for days, and then exponentially we'll just make more and more and more of them, which can just spiral out of control. It's really quite cool. Spark Double does the exact same thing of this. 4 mana for a 0/0. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker control, except it enters with an additional 1/1 counter if it's a creature. It enters additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker, and it isn't legendary if that permanent is legendary. So we keep copying the Spark Double version. We keep having tons and tons of our commanders that aren't legendary. It just spirals completely out of control. Sakashima the Imposter, we can't do things like that because she remains legendary, but it's another way that we can get double the tokens. So Sakashima the Imposter, 4 mana for a 3/1. Comes into play, you may choose a creature in play. If you do, it becomes a copy of that creature, except its name is still Sakashima the Imposter, and it's still legendary. So, legendary rule still applies if we copy our commander, but we've got 2 commanders. Really, really cool. And this can target anything else, so if our opponents have a massive Ulamog, we can have an Ulamog as well. Teferi's Time Twister is an excellent way of resetting any one of these permanents, and it is also a targeting spell that targets any permanent you control. So you can just make a copy of anything with this and then get your original back by flickering it. Exile target permanent you control. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of your next end step. If it enters the battlefield as a creature, it enters with an additional 1/1 counter. Very good. We need that 1/1 counter for all the offense we're going to be doing. Brings me on to number 1. And in at number 1, we have Torrential Gearhulk. One of the best cards, in my opinion, to copy. Absolutely fantastic. And it works so well with all of the instants that we've been playing throughout the entire game. 6 mana for a 5/6 with Flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card will be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So why is this good? Well, we cast Torrential Gearhulk, which will cast an instant in our graveyard, which targets Torrential Gearhulk, which will create a copy of Torrential Gearhulk, which will cast another instant in our graveyard. So at instant speed, at the end of our opponent's turn, say we have 10 instants that target in our graveyard. Torrential Gearhulk comes in, we get 10 copies of Torrential Gearhulk. It just spirals out of control. That's 50 power at instant speed that we can just swing in and smash our opponents to death. And we've probably drawn a bunch of cards off that through all the cantripping that our spells do. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Torrential Gearhulk is incredible in this deck. So is Scholar of the Lost Trove. 7 mana for a 5/5 Sphinx with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant sorcery or artifact card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If an instant or sorcery spell cast this way will be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Sadly, Scholar does not have flash, but you can still generate a ton of value off this, ton of tokens. You just churn through your entire deck, and it's just such a wonderful feeling. Then we got Archaeomancer. But these next two, Shipwreck Dowser and Archaeomancer, very similar cards. and they just help buy back, and you can keep using the same instant sorcery. When it's the battlefield, return target instant sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So you cast an instant on it, the copy comes in, get it back, blah, 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 blah. You've got an absolute army for a couple of blue mana. Really, really good. Shipwreck Dowser is a much better version. It's 5 mana for a 3/3 with prowess. So every single time you cast one of those instant or sorceries, it's going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If it can attack, that's absolutely wonderful. When it's the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Absolutely wonderful in the deck. And it's a merfolk wizard with a big little trident thing that's illuminating the floor of the ocean, I'd assume. Really nice. And those are my top 5 cards for this rather interesting commander. I really like him. I think he's fascinating to play. There's so much synergy, and it's a unique deck. It's something we don't see often. Like, it makes cards that are useless in other places fantastically useful. And that's what I really like about Commander. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this, please subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.